Hello everyone, happy Friday. It's Juliet here, and today we are going to be making a really fun pair of fringe earrings, and these are made using supplies that came from the Lavender Lemonade collection from Eureka Crystal Beads. That collection just came out this week. And it's a gorgeous collection of greens and purples and silvers, and so we've got all kinds of cool things like these triangle shapes in there, and all of these beads plus a lot more. So I'll put a link for that down below if you want to go and check that out. It is definitely a very good value pack, and there are tons and tons of beads in it. I am probably actually going to be making 3 projects out of that box because I've already made another pair of earrings, which I will show you next week, and then I have ideas for one more thing. So I'll probably make 3 videos with that collection. Okay, so really you can almost make this is kind of a stash buster. If you don't have the collection and you're using your own thing, you can kind of make your own color scheme. You don't have to follow the beads that I'm using. I'm just going to teach you the basic concept, and then you can roll from there, okay? So what we'll be doing is we will be beading this little tube at the top, and then I will show you how to attach your fringe onto the tube. And the fringe you can kind of customize however you like, okay? If you don't have this little top, I think they are still available. They're pretty cool. I like them. They're in this stainless steel color, and we got these matching stainless steel earring hoops as well, earring hooks. So I think it looks quite modern and fun. They're kind of quite long and fashionable. So okay, I am going to be using here some 3mm Firepolished beads, and these came out of our box. These are the color Saturated Metallic Primrose Yellow. I have these gorgeous rich purple pearls, and these are Krakovski pearls. They are the color Royal Purple, and they are 4mm. And then I have some O beads here. These are Jet Argentic Full. And then I pulled out a couple little bicones out of our bicone mix that we got. So I pulled out, we got this mix here. I pulled out these kind of silvery ones here. Okay. And a couple of these light purple ones. You could use the dark purple if you wanted for a different look. I mean, you can do it any way you want, really. So I just pulled a few of those out because I'm going to be replicating this earring that I've made here. And then I have a few of our purple seed beads that came in the collection. These are, and some of the green ones, and these are both Preciosa Czech glass seed beads. So you don't have to use, Miyuki or whatever. You can use Czech seed beads or any kind of seed beads, Toho seed beads, whatever flavor of seed bead. But what you do want is you want them to be pretty irregular, meaning they're not crooked, because if you have a crooked bead, it will throw off your fringe. The trick to a nice straight fringe is to use nice straight beads, okay? And then here I have these beautiful Toho Treasures. These are the color Purple Lined Rosaline Rainbow, and they are just absolutely gorgeous. I love the finish on them. Very, very pretty. So these are the Toho cylinder beads that are kind of the same as Delicas. So we'll be using those to do our peyote tube up here, okay? And then I have here some 2x3mm Chinese crystal rondelles in the color Platinum Metallic. And lastly, I have some 15Os. These are Miyuki Galvanized Silver 15Os. And I just wanted to give a little bit of bright, in the middle, and pull in some more of that metallic look. So those are just there, in that middle one. Okay, so to begin, I'm also using some KO nylon beading thread. Now, I chose this color just so you can kind of see what I'm doing. I would recommend using a color that matches your beads at the top here, because as you can see here, you can see a little bit of the thread on the side right here. But you will want to use a nylon thread for this because of the fringe, and nylon is best for fringes. It has the best drape, okay? So get yourself either KO, Miyuki, 1G, or Nymo. Any of those will work. And you're going to need about 3 feet. Okay, so we will begin by adding a stop bead onto our thread. So you're going to pick up one seed bead, just a random bead. It doesn't matter because we're going to pull it off at the end. It's not going to stay on, okay? So I'm picking this green one because it's a contrast to my purple. So you're going to push that down to where you're leaving a tail, and you want to leave a tail that's ideally 2 times the length of your needle, okay? And so then my tail is here, and this is my thread that's attached to the needle. I'm going to sew again from the tail through that thread, so through that bead, sorry, and it's going to form a little loop like this. And I'm going to pull that tight, and that is going to keep our beads from falling off of our thread, okay? So we're now going to begin our peyote stitch. So we're going to pick up 10 of our cylinder beads, our Toho Treasures here, okay? And if you're using delicas, that's fine. And if you are not using this form and you're using a different form, you're going to want to make sure that you pick up an even number of beads, and that even number of beads will fit, you know, within the boundaries of your shape, okay? Okay, so that is 10, 4, 3, and 3. You're going to push all of those down to where your stop bead is. And you're going to pick up one more bead. You're going to skip this last bead that we just added on. And you're going to sew through the second bead, going back down towards your stop bead, okay? And when you pull this tight, see if I can do this, it's kind of hard to hold on to at this point. You want the 2 beads to sit side by side like this, okay? Then you're going to pick up one more bead. You're going to skip the next bead. So I'm coming out from this second bead here. I'm going to skip this third bead here. I'm going to sew into this 4th bead right here. Again, going back down towards my stop bead. And it will form a second little pair. You can pull your 2 sides apart to snug that up, but it should sit like this, okay? Again, you're going to pick up another bead. You're going to skip the next bead, and you're going to sew into the next bead. Repeat that. Pick up a bead, skip the next bead, sew into the next bead. And one more time, you're going to pick up a bead, skip the next bead, and I'm going to sew into the very end bead right before my stop bead. Okay, so we now have what is effectively 3 rows of peyote stitch. Now we're going to turn. You're going to pick up a bead, pull your 2 ends kind of apart just to make sure that everything's snug there, and then you're going to sew straight up into the next bead, which was the last bead that we added. And if it starts to loosen a little, you can just tighten that up, okay? Make sure that that's all nice and snug before you move on. Then you're going to pick up another bead. You're going to sew up into this next sticking out bead right here. And that's going to sit in the gap there. You're going to do this 3 more times to fill in the next 3 gaps. Okay, so I've now reached the end here, and I'm going to pick up another bead, and I'm going to turn, and I'm going to put the beads in here by picking up a bead, sewing into this one, pick up a bead, sew into this one. So I'm going to fill the gaps, and I'm going to keep going, and I'll come back in a second. Let me just quickly put this row on, and I'll show you how you can count your rows, because we are going to do exactly 10 rows. So this is a piece of peyote that is 10 beads tall, and it's going to be 10 beads wide as well. Okay. Okay, I'm just getting that last bead on this row. So when you are doing your peyote and you're wondering how many rows have I done so far, I don't really know. I'm confused and I've lost count and I don't know how far I've gone. You just count the beads on the on each side, because every other row has a bead on it, if you see what I mean here. Okay, so we have 3 at the top and we have 2 at the bottom, which means I've done 5 rows. So I need to continue on and do 5 more rows in the same way. So when I have 5 at the bottom, 5 at the top, I'll come back. Okay, so as you can see, I now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on my bottom and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on my top. And you'll notice that these rows, because we want this, they are offset. So this one starts at the top one on this side, but this one then has one on this side, this one has one on this side. So that way we can zip them together. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to pull off my stop bead really quickly, just because it can get in the way. And I'm going to grab my triangle form and I'm going to lay the beadwork around my form. Just pull that and thread through. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to now zip this together going through the form. So you can see where I'm coming out is where I ended is an inside bead. So I'm going to sew straight into the outside bead on this side, which happens to be an outside bead. Okay, so I'm going to just sew straight down into that bead. And I'm going to pull that together. Then I'm going to sew across here into this sticking out bead on this side. Okay, and that's going to pull those together. Then on the third row, I have a sticking out bead on this side. So I'm going to sew through that one and pull that together. And then on this side, I have a sticking out bead on this row, on the 4th row, and I'm going to sew that together. Okay, and then I'm going to so I'm just going to continue that all the way down, just going from the sticking out left bead to the sticking out right bead until you've sewn through all 10 beads. Okay, and when you finish, you will notice that you're still not attached to the bead where your starter thread is coming out. There's still a little bit of a gap right here. So I'm just going to sew up into that bead there in order to completely close up this gap, and you can pull your tail and your working thread, and we're now completely closed up. Okay, so this is where we're going to begin our first fringe. So our fringes are basically going to be between beads 1 and 2, between beads 3 and 4, between beads 5 and 6, between beads 7 and 8, and between beads 9 and 10. Okay, so I'm just going to literally use this exact same thread and just continue on. Okay, so for my first fringe, I picked up a 2mm rondelle, then I picked up one of my 3mm fire polish beads, then I picked up an O bead, I picked up another 3mm bead, and then I picked up another rondelle. Okay, and then I repeated this again. So I picked up 3mm O bead, 3mm, and one more rondelle. And one more time, I picked up a 3mm, an O bead, a 3mm, and a rondelle. Okay, so I basically have 3 sets of this plus 1 rondelle on the end. Okay, so rondelle, fire polish, O bead, fire polish, rondelle, fire polish. Okay, plus 1 extra rondelle just to finish that off on the end. And I also picked up one of my green seed beads. That's going to be my turning bead. Okay, you're going to push it all down so that it is nice and flush up against, sorry, I caught my tail there. You're going to push it all down so it's up nice and flush against your peyote piece. Okay, and you're going to skip, this is very important, don't forget this step, you're going to skip that end bead. If you sew back up through all of them, they'll all fall off again. So when you're doing a fringe, that's the main thing to remember, and that's the bit that when I'm not paying attention that I forget. I'm just sewing along and I sew up through all the beads, including that end one, and everything falls off. So you've got to skip that end bead. That is the most important bit. Okay, and when you pull that, you may have some slack like I do here in it. Okay, so all you need to do is just kind of grab like the end bead or the 2 end beads. I'm grabbing the rondelle because it's a little bit easier, and just pull your thread until it feels like it's snugged up against the top. Now you don't want it to be super tight or it won't dangle properly. Like if it's really tight, you know, it can be like start to warp. Okay, so you just want it to be no gap, but you don't need to be like incredibly strong about it. Okay, okay, so once you have got that tension the way you like it, you're going to, so I'm coming out this bead. Now obviously these beads are offset here. Okay, so I'm just going to sew through beads 2 and 3 so that I'm coming out from the next bead that is in line with this bead that I started at. Okay, so I'm just going to sew through beads 2 and 3. So this is the bead that I started. It's kind of under the thread there. That's the bead I started at, and then I'm just going through one and then through the next one. Okay, and that's how we're going to keep our fringe straight. Okay, so for our second line of beads, this is the pattern that I picked up. So I picked up a rondelle. I always started with a rondelle. I think it looks nice to have all a little line of rondelles at the top there. Okay, so it's kind of a similar pattern, except we're doing rondelle, then we're doing a pearl, then we're doing a crystal bicone. So the way I did my crystal bicones was I did first a silver, then a purple, then a silver. So I did it like in this order, okay? So you've got your rondelle, your pearl, and then I did a silver bicone, another pearl, and then I repeated this, and I did this 3 times as well, just like I did on this row. We're having 3 units of this, so that's 1 unit of that. Again, I'm picking up my rondelle, I'm picking up a pearl. This time I'm going to pick up this bead instead, okay, the purple bicone, and then another pearl, okay, so that's my 2nd unit. I'm going to push that down, and then my 3rd unit, I'm going to pick up rondelle, again a pearl, this time a silver bicone and a pearl. And then to finish off, I picked up a rondelle and a purple seed bead, okay? You're gonna push all of that down so that it's pushed up against your top here. Remember, you're going to skip that end bead. That is very important. And you're gonna sew all the way back through all of those beads. Okay, I've got my 2nd one on. I just need to snug it up. I'm going to grab that rondelle and I'm going to pull, and it's going to snug right up against my base. Okay, to move on to the next row, I'm going to do exactly the same thing that I just did. So I'm coming out from this bead here. So I'm just going to sew through the next 2 beads. So I'm just going like diagonal into the one next one, and then I'm coming out from the bead after that. Okay, you can kind of pull that if you need to, adjust your tail. The nice thing is these fringes, because they're quite chunky, they have good weight to hold the beads down, so that also helps keep them straight. Okay, so now we're going to do our little line of seed beads here. So this is a fun row. You're going to begin with a rondelle, and then you're going to pick up a 15-0, and then whatever you want your first color of seed bead. So I'm doing green, and then another 15-0. Okay, so that's my first unit there. Then I'm going to do a unit using light purple. Okay, so I picked up the same thing but with the lighter purple bead, and then I'm going to also do one using the Toho Treasure that we used to make the top of our unit here. So we're going to pick the same up using that Toho Treasure. Okay, so we have this. Okay, so what I did is I did 3 of this pattern. So 3, like repeat 3 more times. Green, light purple, dark purple, green, light purple, dark purple, green, light purple, dark purple. Okay, and then you're going to end, you're going to put one of your rondelles on the end, and then I put a green for my turning bead because that would be the next color in the chain anyway. I didn't put the 15-0, I just used the green seed bead. Kind of ties in with the ends of those 3 strands there. So after the last rondelle, you're just going to add 1 green seed bead. Okay, so I will quickly do that. Okay, so I've picked up all of my beads. Remember to skip that end bead and then sew all the way back up. When you get to the top, you're going to sew diagonal through the next bead, and then into the next bead you're going to repeat this fringe here. Okay, and then you're going to sew one more time diagonally, and you're going to repeat this fringe. So this fringe will be coming out 1 bead before the end. Okay, the last green fringe. So I will get to that point and then I will come back and show you how to finish off. Okay, so I have just added on my last fringe here, and I am coming out right before the end. So I'm just going to sew through one of the end beads here that is right next to the bead that I'm coming out from, okay? And once you've done that, you're pretty much done. You just need to weave your thread back through the beads. If you want, you can try and meet your tail and sew a knot, but I don't usually bother with that. I think if you sew up and down 3 times, you should be absolutely fine, and you can just cut off your thread. So all I'm going to do here, if I'm coming out this bead, I'm just going to sew straight into the next bead, and I'm going to just sew diagonally like this all the way down the line. So going through 2 beads at a time in order to get through to the other side, and then I will turn and make my way back again, just to reinforce all of that, and then I can cut that thread off, and then I'll do the same thing. I probably won't be able to get through 2 whole rows. Well, I might with that end thread. We'll see how that goes, but that is how you're going to finish that off. So let me get there, and then I need to show you something about these earring wires that came in our collection. So I'll be back in a second. Okay, so I got my threads sewn in, and with these earring wires that came, these are stainless steel, which means they are harder metal than a lot of other regular ear wires that you might get. They're quite hard, okay? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to close this up before I even begin, because it can be really hard to close this. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to turn it almost past the point where you want it to. So I'm kind of almost like going past it, you see? Okay, and then you can straighten that out like this, and that way it's nice and flush up against your ear wire, and then you can twist it to the side to open it. These are really, really tough to maneuver for some reason. And then you can pop your earring on and twist it to the side again to close. But you're going to want to take that step to get it pushed in, because it's really hard to push it in once you already have something on your earring wire. Okay, so anyway, here they are, my earrings, and I love these. I think they're so dramatic, and the color is just beautiful. Like the length there, these are really cool. These are way cooler than anything I normally make. Anyway, so I hope you try these, and as I said, they're great stash busters if you have only a few beads of something that you want to use up. This is a perfect idea. You can go do your own color scheme. These little triangle findings are great for the top, I think. So anyway, let me know what you think. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below, and do go and check out the collections at Eureka Crystal Beads. They are so beautiful. I will see you guys very soon for another video. Take care. Bye.